Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's unscripted podcast on how to empower a data driven environment for clinical researchers and allow them to get fast, reproducible, and great insight from their data. I'm Rim, Chief Scientific Officer at Run Biolinks, and your host for today's episode. Today, we'll discuss the critical role of data handling, management, infrastructure, implementation in the space of medical research, particularly within large consortia and multi-site collaborations. Data is the backbone of clinical research. It supports the collaborative efforts of researchers and scientists across various institutions, all working together towards advancing medical science. But these collaborations come with challenges, such as harmonization of data collection methods across different sites. We still talk about data silos, and we need to ensure consistency and standardization of the processes across different sites. But choosing the right data platform is another critical task. The platform needs to be compatible and also meeting the diverse needs of the multi-site studies depending on the users. It must enable seamless and near to real-time data integration, data quality checks, making sure that we are meeting the standards and the data are integral and ensuring robust data privacy and security. This is what we are talking about today in this episode. We hope to cover the importance of a solid data foundation and strategies to maintain data quality across different sites and best practices for data collection. We'll also discuss the ethical consideration and regulatory requirement necessary for protecting participants' data in large multi-site clinical studies. Join me in this episode, two scientists and experts in data management, data governance, and analysis. Together, we share our experiences from early collaborations to advanced data-driven methodologies we use today. We'll highlight real-life cases studies, discuss innovations in data handling, and we hope to offer practical strategies for our listeners to optimize your research efforts, all based on our experience. So today, I'm really happy and pleased to have with me my dear friends and colleagues, Joanne Arti and Radha Niva, my co-host from Unscripted. I have the immense pleasure of speaking with Joanne, a longtime collaborator, outstanding scientist. She is currently assistant professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School, where she leads the data management and analysis core at Boston Children's Hospital within the Precision Vaccine Program. In her role, she supports multiple international and multi-center consortia for clinical and data coordination, quality assurance protocol, analysis of system immunology profiling tools, and so much more that you will hear from her today. Her area of research is focused on characterizing vaccine and infection-induced immune responses using system immunology approaches. Joining me also my unscripted co-host Rad Aniva, CEO at Run Biolinks, a biotechnology research accelerator specialized in optimizing and speeding up clinical research through technology-enabled services. Rad is also a data leader with more than 20 years experience in leadership roles in data strategy, business transformation in both academia and industry. His expertise lies in pioneer innovative approaches that can unlock the full potential of data, drive business growth, and foster data-centric culture within the organizations. Welcome to the podcast, Joanne, and thanks for joining me, Rad.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So maybe we can, what about we start with an overview on the role and importance of data in clinical research studies, especially within large consortiums or multi-site collaborations. So we know all that data is the backbone in research studies. And Joanne, I do remember our very first common clinical trial or clinical research study where we were tested to set up from lab to operations to data perspective for the trial. And you were in Boston, where you are still actually now today. I was in Vancouver, and the sites were in the Gambia and Papua New Guinea. So we're trying to set up a remote tracking system for biological samples and trying to set up to find the best way to standardize the data collection, the lab processes, and link all this together to have data generated and integrated well down the line. It was hectic, but very, very fun times. So, what does your day-to-day role at BCH looks like today, Joanne?
So from that time, Rim, until at this moment, our team actually grown from that.
Mhm.
Currently, I am leading the data management and analysis core. Before, we were doing mostly data management, but as you know, I am a trained bioinformatician after all, and analysis is pretty much something that I do in a day to day, even as
Mhm.
during my PhD and also as a postdoc. So this is really an important aspect to be a part of our team. So now we have grown. We have more projects than before. So it has been busier, I guess, but more opportunities, what I can say.
This is incredible, amazing. So, being the data lead team, so can you share thoughts on why data is so central in these clinical research multi-site studies?
hmm That's a great question, Rim. Um, I recall there was a workshop that I attended in NIH mentioning that all the work that we do now in the science community are all computational. And that's really
Hmm.
true, right?
Yeah.
We capture data not in
Hmm.
papers anymore. It has to be through a computer. We do a lot of the work not only in the bench, we have to put those results in the computer. But more and more, we know that the data collection are escalating. There's
Hmm.
more research questions that we're also investigating. So it's going to be a part of our life. When we wake up in the morning, we look at our phones, that's already data being captured
Hmm.
and collected. So this is basically what we are doing right now. But just as we are going to talk more about, we have to be
Hmm.
able to think further in managing this data and not just something of dumping all this data without even any meaningful relationships. So I guess that is how important it will be because as a part of science, we need to make sure that as we're collecting this data, that we're also turning those into knowledge. And I think that is the most important thing that we can actually do while collecting these data sets.
Definitely. And as you said, like data, we are collecting data since we wake up in the morning. And now with the wearables and the opportunity to track more data than before, it's not only biological that we set up like for the study, but now we can track people like 24 hours to look at other research questions. So I think that data is central in our personal life as much as in research. But for research, we can extract knowledge from those precious data that are collected in real time. So coordinating multi-site studies and generating all this data and capturing it and making a meaningful output out of it. I think it involves a lot of significant logistical planning. This is what we all face when we did it, and especially I think in COVID it was even more drastic. So implementing a consistent data structure, I think it's the most challenging side of it, especially when some sites are new from certain technologies or changing the way they usually operate. So I believe that here, the most important part that I faced is how to make communication streamlined and how making sure that people adopt also these technologies. So maybe like we can, from your experience, Joanne, what are the challenges that you have encountered while implementing multi-site clinical studies, especially in terms of logistic, data structure, and site coordination?
Mhm. I think that that's a great question because each of the study that we have to understand what's the responsibility and also what's the overarching goal for that study.
Mhm.
There are some studies that I have led that are prospective studies, and this is
Mhm.
something that where we work together. We know that we need to set up some data infrastructure from ground up.
Yeah.
Therefore, we can design whatever is
Mm-hmm.
amenable and what works. We have to
Yes.
understand not only about the study design of the project, but also the cultural aspects of where the
Yeah.
studies will actually happen. We have to also
Mm-hmm.
understand the capabilities of these clinical sites. What do they
Yes.
have? Is this a possibility if we actually put it in? And if it's not a possibility, what's our alternative solution? It's
Mm-hmm.
um, very important that we listen to them and not just, dismiss things that they have suggested to us, because that will be something that they
Mm-hmm.
will apply in their
Mm-hmm.
team.
Yeah.
For example, they might have problems with um, internet bandwidth, right? Especially in some
Mm-hmm.
places in the world that might not have the same connection as in the US or in Canada, or in places that have more
Mm-hmm.
developed infrastructure. We have to be flexible on that as well. However,
Mm-hmm.
the flexibility should also not compromise the standards that we are collecting. So that's why we try to support them with some other infrastructures that we can do. For example, when we collect the data, what are those some types or some things that we can actually do on our end, so that
Mm-hmm.
we can perhaps recommend to them what are the changes that they need to do, so that we'll get
Yeah.
the most correct or updated data as possible.
Yeah, it's a fine line, really, like between like leaving people using the processes that they have in place and implementing new one at the same time, making them feel comfortable about this new change. So I feel like it's very tricky, but at the same time, you have to have a communication team who is really, really up, like maybe like a clinical research manager who is overseeing this every day and being on top of the communication and making sure that they listen to everyone's request and what they can and cannot do, depending on the setting where the study is happening. So that's a challenge every day, I'm sure,
It is a
Joanne.
challenge.
And but are there any like strategies? I mean, you talked about the challenges that they can face and some of the strategies, but do you
Yeah.
have like any strategies that you think that have proven to be really successful in implementing this kind of clinical research studies across different sites and adoption of these new technologies across different teams as well?
hmm So the one I mentioned a while ago is more of
Yes.
perspective, right? For
Hmm.
perspective, I feel like it's more flexible, it's easier. What I want, we can actually apply, and then we can
Yes.
train individuals.
Yeah.
We had some studies also, or actually some of those studies are currently ongoing, that they are retrospectives, meaning
Mm.
that they already have the samples collected. But
Yes.
when they collected the samples, that means they have their own database. That means they
Hmm.
have their own pipeline. They have their own SOP. Now, if we're going to strategize it with other sites and perhaps bring it all together, then you have to be like, okay, we have to think about, like, as a team right now, not just one site, how are we going to make sure that we're all inconsistent, or maybe try a system that in some things that we can actually be consistent, in some others we can be flexible. So
Hmm.
that is why you really have, just like what you mentioned, a communication with them, um, and also work with their team, understand their SOP, try to ask more questions. Another thing that you can probably have is pretty much a training, and mention to them what you really want to achieve, so that they can also
Hmm.
understand your perspective, that there are
Yeah.
some of those aspects that are non-negotiable, right? For example, we need
Hmm.
to make sure that they're standardized with this particular variables. These are
Yes,
non-negotiables for us to be successful as a team,
that's right.
not as a part of the one doing the harmonization, but as a team.
Hmm.
You have to make them feel that they're included, um, and that will help you later on,
Yes.
especially as collecting more and more data will happen. And also, you have
Yeah.
to, um, I think I've already mentioned this a while ago, be be more sensitive to
Hmm.
cultural aspects, to
Yes.
things that are not written down right in the protocols. They
Hmm.
might have a different way of communicating, right? And you
Yes.
have to really have those understanding and really know them, um, especially right now with Zoom. Sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
hard, or even emails, right? Emails don't have any emotions. So the
Yeah.
way to do it is, especially if they're in another countries, have that constant or regular communication, face to
Mm-hmm.
face or even through Zoom, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually get to learn more about the people that you're going to work with in the ground.
Yeah, I totally agree, Joanne. I think that this is what exactly we do. I think going and meeting people and understanding their needs, because when you understand the needs of the different sites you work with, and people, like, you hear what people struggles for every day. For example, when running their clinical research studies, you can apply the right strategy. But I understand that some consortium or some, like, studies come with their non-negotiable, as you said, like
Yeah.
data plan. So it has to be applied. But the way that I understand, like, you do it well, like, the strategy is make them understand the why, so they can apply it easily.
Exactly.
When people understand why we
Exactly.
are doing this a certain way, it
Hmm.
goes like, it's applicable more and you can implement it easily. But not understanding the why and saying, this is the plan, we are doing this way, you have to adopt it, I don't think it will work. And I think the strategy that works the best, I think, is to really run a small pilot, like training small
Correct.
teams and doing that
Yes.
proof of concept in the beginning of the study, for people to see the status where they start from, and the to be status, and how it changed their life, how it streamlines their operations on a daily basis. And seeing that conversion, like in a small team, and doing that pilot, can be a good reason to apply it at a larger scale and at a
Hmm.
larger team member. So I feel
And
like these are in my mind, like, the best practices.
great. And also, I want to add, Rim, and this is based on experience, especially during the
Hmm.
pandemic, is to take time to write a manual of operations before
Yes,
starting. Because there
definitely.
are some of our projects that we probably like, okay, just to have to say that we do have an SP, go ahead. But a manual of
Hmm.
procedures that everyone agrees to, that everyone
Yep.
is a contributor, is also an
Hmm.
important thing. And I've seen the difference of like, okay, but we do have an MOP or an SOP that we go back to,
Hmm.
and basically they were the ones that wrote it. They feel
Yes,
connected to that MOP and not just something handed off to them. You
definitely.
mentioned about the data analysis plan. That is also something that we are adapting to our studies. That we
Hmm.
do have the data, we do have the operating plan, which will
Hmm.
include perhaps how the data will be managed. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, we need also a data analysis plan, so that you already know, like, okay, what you're going to do. So, always they say, especially with systems biology or systems immunology techniques,
Hmm.
that they are fishing expedition. Well, that's the
Yes.
reason why you have to have a DAP or a data analysis plan, so that you can have some sort of a hypothesis of what you're expecting, or perhaps will guide you to what you are going to accomplish for the study.
Yeah, definitely, Joanne. And this is exactly what I wanted to jump into right away, the data management plan and the data analysis plan. Because this is like, often, I would not say, like, I would not make it a general statement, but it's usually missed or put aside. Like, it's not clear since the beginning that people have to all contribute to draft a data management plan or data analysis plan before the study starts. They know the main hypothesis, but it has to be very clear on where the data will be, how the data will be managed, how
Yes.
data will be accessed, and all that. And this is exactly the next segment that I wanted to discuss with both of you, Joanne and Brad. So,
Mhm.
what do you both think about the best practices of data collection in large clinical studies, and how, especially when we want to harmonize data across different sites and sources, how do we manage that? How do we harmonize that and standardize it? So, I'll start with you, Rad, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely. So this is really an important question because we've seen the DMP, we're gonna call it the DMP, the data management plan, overlooked
Mhm.
over the years. So at some point it became a document that you have to put on shelf with the other sets of document that you might or might not
Mhm.
prepare. And people usually tend to forget that that data management plan is just an exercise that you do along the study. So there's no, it's not something that you do in the beginning and then you forget about it, and then you go back and edit at some point. um, because the data management plan contains all the elements that we started talking about since the session in the podcast. So there's mainly a big section of stakeholder management, and to determine who does what exactly and at what point during the study. And this is really important to clarify. And we've seen cases where some studies that we worked with a couple of years ago, where that mentality shift between considering a DMP as a document or as a living standards that people go off into is happening. And main reason is that during the study you might have a lot of people coming in and out of the study, so it's very important to keep consistent the standards that we decided before we start collecting the data in the beginning. So there's that big part of stakeholder management. It's really important within the data management plan, but also there's the infrastructure preparation for data collection, which is sometimes it's not really well managed within research settings because we don't know what we don't know. So we start collecting data, but we are not good at predicting our needs in terms of data collection. So, how many data we're going to be collecting for the studies, giving other studies that we did in the past that might be similar, for example. So this is where collecting this information, the metadata from previous studies, is extremely important. Doing the things the same way is extremely important because that allows us to predict before the study starts the resources that we need in terms of number of data that we're going to be collecting, in terms of resources, in terms of servers, how we're going to proceed the data, what kind of post analysis we're going to be doing. Are we going to use sophisticated servers with GPU resources for advanced analytics, machine learning, AI, and what have you? So all this goes into the data management plan. And usually, uh, what I advise people to do is to take your time to do the data management plan properly. So it's not something that we're going to say, okay, next week we're going to have a DMP done and signed by everyone. That it's not. It doesn't happen like this. It's we need to really think about that really carefully and take the time to discuss with all stakeholders within the study, from the PI to the people managing data with the IT services and people managing the data from data perspective. Everyone involved in the study needs to be a part of this, including also the people who are not gonna handle the data directly, like all the people managing communication and what have you. So all these people are important to listen to from data perspective, to know exactly what to expect before the study starts.
Yeah, thanks, Rad. And I think that you pointed out to two main important aspects here. Is it's a living document, so it has to be, yes, well established in the very beginning, but then it can be changed along the way if our predictions are not good enough, so we can adjust it as more data if we are not really aware of what is needed in the long run throughout all the study. But also the other part is making sure that it's being understood by everyone and learning from the previous experience to predict what's needed for the next one. So I think that those two aspects are very important. Joanne, what's your point of view on that?
So yeah, we same thing as Red is doing. We do have a data managed plan, especially for all the studies that we have. But I think, as you know, Rim, and also from the
Mm-hmm.
other studies that we work together, we are a big fan of quality assurance, quality control
Yes.
measurements.
Yes.
And this is something that we need to make sure, especially with our collaborators, for them to know that this is our responsibility. And
Mm-hmm.
this is not just for looking for errors, but this is something that can help us to prevent errors in the end. So basically, I
Definitely.
just want to reiterate the difference of quality control and quality assurance. For the
Mm-hmm.
quality control, that is pretty much a real time. assessment of the
Mm-hmm.
database, for example, mainly like correction of the real-time processes, identifying the errors right away in
Yeah.
the database. So our data managers are the ones, especially for the clinical data, helping out with those that are in the ground, and
Mm-hmm.
pretty much giving us like a regular audit of like, okay, let's
Mm-hmm.
run it for this week. What does it look like? Are there any errors in how the data were inputted? This is something that we actually work with them. Also, this is also the communication between the teams or collaboration actually happen,
Yeah.
because we pretty much ask those data providers or data
Mm-hmm.
generators, what are the standards that you perform in your team? Because
Yes.
probably that is how we can mimic our step number two, which is a data assurance. You told
Mm-hmm.
us that this is your standard. What we're going to do is, based from your standard, we can probably adapt it and do a quality check again, or pretty
Mm-hmm.
much a data assurance, because this is something that you need two or more sets of eyes to look at
Yeah.
the data, because there might be some errors in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Again, being flexible, but also these are the non-negotiables that we have as
Mm-hmm.
a data management and analysis score, that this is a procedure that we will do once we get the data. We have a pipeline to actually do, just to see and whether there are questions along the way, because once you
Mm-hmm.
get the data and it's already available for everyone, it's harder to
Yes.
correct. So it's
Yes.
easier to correct once you get it,
Mhm.
because also there are turnovers of personnel.
Mm-hmm.
You Most of the data analysts will probably analyze it in 1 or 2 years. Who
Mhm.
knows if
Yeah.
those that actually input the data are still there? So it might
Yeah.
be to correct as soon as possible, or perhaps work on it as possible so you understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, Joanne. And this is exactly, you hit a very important, you brought up a very important aspect here on the data management plan, is to have the data quality control and assurance set up. Because most, like SO studies are running for example, 1 year. I understand for COVID, maybe time, we did not have the time to set up properly and things were fast. But for other settings, I saw some studies taking like 1 year for data cleaning afterwards, and some of the personals are not there around anymore to make sure that they can correct that properly. So I think learning from those pitfalls, I think that we can we now all agree that quality control measures have to be set up in the very beginning using the standards that you just mentioned. Depending on the study, you know where the standards are, you put those standards in your quality checks before the study starts, so you can really capture inconsistencies as they happen and you correct them. So it can be
Mhm.
automated. I think Rad can talk about this, how we can automate the data quality checks on a, like, you can see the data in real time now. You can put your quality checks controls they're set up since the beginning. So when an inconsistency happen, you can spot it and you can correct it, and you don't have to wait until the study finish to do those adjustments. That sometimes you can lose a lot of, like, a large amount of data because they cannot be analyzed because you don't have a way to correct them anymore. So Rad, maybe because we brought up this topic, I know that you are a fan of quality check and quality assurance throughout the whole study and doing it live as in real time as possible. So can you give us like your how do you do that, and how in a ideal world things should happen when you collect large amount of data on a daily basis?
Definitely. So one thing before I answer the question, so I'm just gonna go back for the standards topic that Joanne brought. So there
Mm-hmm.
are standards that we um, do depending on the stakeholder standards, and but there are also standards depending on the study that are not related to what we do for the study in particular, but this is
Mm-hmm.
imposed by the setting that we work with. For example, if we have any private personal identifiable information that we analyze, and whether in the setting where we operate we are under specific regulation to respect like HIPAA, GDPR, and all the other standards, These are also things that we need also to merge. That adds a complexity on the management from standards perspective, but also there's the untold standards.
Mm-hmm.
Joanne brought that in the beginning a little bit. When we are in a setting where you have to go collect data from participants and then you have to take permission from the people on the ground to take that. So usually when this happens, these are
Mm-hmm.
not the announced standards. So we have to be close to the participants. We have to respect their culture. We have to respect their setting prior to getting to uh, make them understand why we do all these studies and things like that. So all this adds and more on the complexity from standard perspective. Now, to answer your question about the real time data entry, so it's all in the design of the infrastructure, and also on the criticality of designing the right attributes to collect and to capture early on when we design the databases and system that allows the data capture. I think it's very critical and important to focus on time based attributes where we collect the data, because that traces the history of the data
Mm-hmm.
transformation along the way.
Image.
So we are not just talking about capture, but when the data moves from one system to the other, who did what, when exactly,
Mm-hmm.
so that traces the lineage of everything that was happening on the data, because the data keeps moving and keeps transforming, and also
Mm-hmm.
as soon as we touch the data, we create additional data sets. So we need to be aware of all these things, not just for QA and QC perspective, but also for consistency in terms of accuracy. When we give the data to the analyst at the end of the spectrum or the data
Mm-hmm.
scientist to do some analysis, we have to be confident that nothing happened in the meantime. So it's really important to do that, but also it's really important to design an infrastructure that allows you to see the data happening in real time.
Hmm.
And I think it's getting more and more um, complex these days because of the data keeps changing in terms of nature. So we're not just collecting data in databases anymore. These are not
Mm-hmm.
just transactional data, but we have data coming from different devices. We have data that is binary. We have transcript from interviews. We have
Mm-hmm.
videos. So the data is getting more and more complex, and
Yeah.
the infrastructure needs to adapt to this complexity to be able to say that we do real time. And to add on that complexity, we have the deployment of these infrastructures. Sometimes it's also a limiting factor within organizations because we want to do some studies with a big restriction in terms of compliance and privacy.
Hmm.
So we have to do everything on premise, or we have to do everything on the cloud, or we have to do things in hybrid way. So that is adding more and more complexity on the initial design that we need to do prior to the study to start. So and along the way we have to adjust and tweak the system. It's not just we don't set an infrastructure to say, okay, this is how it's going to be from the beginning to the end. Along the way, we do our best in the beginning, and along the way, we say, okay, this is not working. We need to adjust. So that flexibility needs to exist as well,
Yep.
and that comes with the engagement with the stakeholder within the study to know exactly whether or not we're doing well.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that hearing your two point of view, I think that your thought about that, I think that the standardization is really crucial to maintain this quality and quality of the data throughout the whole project life cycle. And I'm really, and I know that sometimes you have to take time to train people well, to implement it carefully and take time for that. But sometimes you don't have time. We knew from COVID that we have to have a swift implementation of the standards, of everything that needs to be implemented right away. There is no time. So, how do we do that swiftly for every study? Do we use it the same way for every single study to maintain these standards and consistency across different studies as well? But how do we maintain the standardization of data collection methods? Uh, like how do you maintain it throughout all the study, and whether the component of training the teams and also checking the training records, maybe like not records as a document, but having like maybe some strategies to have some video training that people have access to all the time, to make sure that this is maintained, the standards that you set up in the very beginning are maintained, and the data quality, you make sure that people who are on board at the very beginning of the study will be maintaining this kind of standards, but also people joining throughout the study will be
Mm.
maintaining as well for the swift implementation of your strategy. So to go back to the question, so how do you make sure that consistency of the data collection and the standards are maintained throughout all the study? And the second, whether the training component is a really important aspect of this to make this happen in your opinion or from your experience, both of you. Yeah, maybe Joanne, we can start with you because I know that this
I can
is what you
probably,
do on a
yeah,
daily basis.
daily basis, right? I can probably start with your number two, but because that's easier to answer. I think
Yes.
training is really important, and
Mm.
if you cannot have it like a one-on-one training with this people, make sure that they even you record the training slides or training
Yes.
sessions, and
Yeah.
you make it as imperative because
Mm-hmm.
they will get lost. It will take more time for them to actually go through and find on their own rather than going
Mm-hmm.
to through training. And I had
Mm-hmm.
it as an experience on myself, but also experience for others who are pretty new
Mm-hmm.
to the study and they get onboarded. There are new postdocs or new data analysts, and
Mm-hmm.
when they see the database, they get like, okay, that's a lot of data. What do I
Yeah.
do? And when we say we have a documentation, we have README
Mm-hmm.
files,
Mm-hmm.
we have training slides, maybe start from there. And then once
Yeah.
you review that, let's talk. And then we can
Mm-hmm.
probably address the questions. And the
Yeah.
second one that you have, like, how to maintain the standardization and consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I think I already mentioned as well,
Mm.
operating procedures are important,
Yes.
documentation
Yeah.
are important. In the height of COVID, there is one study that we led in which it actually started few weeks after WHO mentioned that COVID is, a pandemic. So we work
Mm-hmm.
with the government officials to set up a system in which we were able to set up from ground to first enrollment within, I would say, 12 weeks.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
was
That's a
crazy.
record
It
time.
was
Yeah.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy. Money is not a problem during that time because of, like,
Yeah.
how resources
Everyone.
were
Yeah.
allocated. Make use of those resources given to you, and
Yes.
also look for the best people to work with you. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
is also a testament, like when you work with people who knows their work best, they already have been doing
Mm-hmm.
it for how many years, very similar to how people who are have been working on vaccines should be the one
Mm-hmm.
working on it.
Yeah.
There will be, you will accomplish great things. There are a lot of challenges along the way. There are some
Mm-hmm.
hiccups. There might be some resources that are hard to find, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But we can learn from previous experience. And I think the previous experience is something that was helpful to me because
Mm-hmm.
we already have previous experience of consortia type of activity, doing data
Mm-hmm.
management, analysis, and others. There was an ongoing infrastructure. It might not be
Mm-hmm.
COVID because COVID is new, but it was
Yeah.
infectious disease. It was pretty much
Mm-hmm.
very similar aspect and strategy. I've also learned from experience what are those strategies that don't work well with large
Mm-hmm.
consortia, then I
Mm-hmm.
won't apply it anymore for the new consortium.
Yes.
If it doesn't work
Yeah.
for others, try to listen to, how it was before, and then
Mm-hmm.
try to improve it. And then again, it's really like a test and, trial and test, even in how you set up this kind of system, even with standardization.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Previously, it might be that some of those databases or variables that were collected were unclear. Maybe we
Mm-hmm.
need to make it clear for the new study. So I think that's really something that I've learned from experience on how to make this happen.
Yeah, and this is only the only way that we can improve is to learn from the failures more than from the success. Of course, for the success, you can maintain the same thing that you used before, but from we when there is, like, for example, a pandemic or an infectious disease that's really spreading fast, and you have to be very fast in implementing your strategies. You have to fail fast. If you fail, you have to fail fast and recover.
Correct.
But you mentioned it, like the 12 weeks for COVID times. But do you think that now, from the experience that you have learned from the previous pandemic, is it possible to really implement a large clinical study faster than 3 weeks? From 12 weeks, sorry.
So hard. It was so hard during
Yeah.
that time, Ren. But
Mhm.
there were a lot of us working together.
Mhm.
We have to
Yeah.
set aside all our other studies and
Hmm.
focus on COVID. And we were
Yeah.
working even during the weekend because people are
Yeah.
dying. Unfortunately, that's how it is,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And you want
Yeah.
to prevent as fast as possible and try to
Hmm.
understand what you can learn from this new disease. And I think that's
Hmm.
going to be something, that will happen, especially as unfortunately that might happen with viral or infectious diseases, but
Yes.
there has to
Yeah.
be an infrastructure already in place.
Yeah.
um,
So do you think we are ready for, I mean, I don't really like think about next pandemic because it was horrible for everyone. And I think it was a major disaster for like across the world. But I think that are we like I always think about it. And when something happens, for example, these days they are talking about mpox, and they are
and
talking
pox,
about
yeah.
other things that are emerging. Are we really ready? Do we have something in place, platform, and the strategy to have a swift implementation? Are we ready for the next
I think
step?
we're working on it, right? We're all working on it
Hmm.
together. In terms of
Hmm.
readiness, I think it's really like
Yes.
an individual as well, not only collective,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
um,
I
but
would,
I
I would
think
say,
we've learned
yeah,
a lot.
yeah, go for
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. Right.
No, I'm just saying, like, we've learned a lot from
We've
COVID,
learned a lot.
right?
Yeah.
I
Lesson
did.
learned
So,
um,
from the past.
yeah, what I wanted to say is that we are aware, because of
Hmm.
COVID, we are aware of our level of readiness. And
right.
we are now aware of how complex it is to be reactive very quickly in terms of scenarios like that. So, and we've seen governments struggling with the COVID pandemic. So not just on the research level, but on the at the level of governments. So are we
Mhm.
ready? It's a question that is very hard to respond to, but we are working on getting ready. So that's that. I
Correct.
think that's the most accurate thing
Yeah.
to do. So,
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you both for being so optimistic, but also being aware of the situation and
Realistic,
be
maybe.
realistic.
listed,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, to ensure, I mean, we were talking about data quality, we are talking about consistency across, like throughout the whole life cycle of the project. But it's only one piece of the puzzle. This is what we need, what we want to do. But how
Mhm.
we are doing it, this is what I wanted to talk to both of you about, because you are both very technical as well. And I
Mhm.
wanted to touch base on the choice of the data platform that you are working with. We're not
Great.
talking about tools, disparate tools, and different choices from different like teams who are comfortable of a way of doing things. But I think that a critical aspect of choosing the right data platform to support your study and your efforts that you are doing on a daily basis is very important. So the question to both of you, Joanne and Rad, how to choose the right strategy, how to choose the right fit for your study when it comes to data platforms, and how important is the compatibility, scalability when selecting this type of data platforms for multi-site clinical research. I will start with you, Joanne.
So I can probably, based on this experience again, Brad mentioned or touch a little bit about policies, right? There are some
Mm-hmm,
policies that are related to the country where you're actually having that study. For
mm-hmm,
example, are they, part of an IRB? Are they exempted to IRB? Here in the US, that's
mm-hmm,
how we do it. However, that's only US. What if it's actually US plus Europe? And
Mm.
Europe has their own policies on how data are captured, data are collected, data are shared. You have to understand that too. There might be some of those that have to be a part of your plans with setting up this type of structure. Also, you have to understand the vast of, like, the infrastructure, how much you're going to collect in the end, and that is probably more of estimation.
Mm-hmm.
For example, for some of the systems immunology that we're doing, what are the type of assays that you're actually collecting, and from those
Mm-hmm.
collection assays, how many visits do we have,
Yep.
and then multiply it by the number of individuals that you're trying in the maximum range, and then try to estimate from there, like, okay, based on this, I already know, for example, I have 1,000 participants that I'm having. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to do XYZ omics
Mm-hmm.
technique. We're going to collect it with how many visits. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to actually know, based on that, how much is one transcriptomics data? How much
Yeah.
gigabyte will I actually generate?
Mm-hmm.
So there you can actually do your projection, and also when
Mm-hmm.
that projection happens every year. Therefore, from then, it's like, okay, that means I have to have about 10 terabytes of data. Therefore,
Mm-hmm.
this platform will work well rather than this platform. I think you have to be
Okay.
flexible that way too. So it's really
Yeah.
like experience and also being able to think fast. It
Yeah.
can also be a trial or test. Some of them don't work well. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them, you have to make sure also on how flexible it is. User friendliness is an important thing, because
Yes.
no matter how you want
No.
to use a particular database, if people don't want to use it because they don't want to use it, they don't understand it,
Mm-hmm.
it will
Mm-hmm.
prevent them from actually being, it should, a data infrastructure should help people rather than shy away from people using it for a system, right?
Yeah.
So that's also
Exactly. Yeah.
an aspect. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are. It's very important to, and at least this is what we're trying to say to people that we work with all the time, is like we are shifting the mindset from tools to platform, and this is really
Mm-hmm.
critical for people to understand that. Um, and that's something that I heard a lot. So I even saw a couple of studies that we encountered. So we didn't probably work with at the time, but we said we have a business analysis for sort of phase of assessing the situation and what kind of data they have and things like that. And we realized that they were collecting data on Excel spreadsheet for 30 years.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and, and this is
Mm-hmm.
That's
it was
heavy.
shocking for yeah, it's really shocking. Why they
Yeah.
do that? Because it's easy, because it's cheap relatively, and but people don't put the risk of doing this in
Mm-hmm.
their estimation of whether or not it's a good thing to do or not. So and we are shifting towards platform because, as I mentioned, that the data is keeping changing in terms of structure, in terms of type, in terms of we are dealing with more unstructured data these days than structured data.
Yeah.
And so that shifting mentality between tools and platform is very, very important to embed within the educational material that we have. And this is like a strategy that we have to do not just for a specific study, but we do it outside the studies. When we are within an organization, we have to keep that sort of this is part of the data literacy program, where we educate people on the right thing to do. um,
Mm-hmm.
so so that shift in mindset from tools to platform is very critical. And this is what we really tend, because they have a nature of flexibility. Platforms
Mm-hmm.
change, tools they don't. So and that's
Mm-hmm.
what platforms are more. It's the better strategy to adopt from design perspective for clinical studies, because we're going to have that flexibility of changing one part of the platform, swapping it with another technology, and technology is going to move
Yep.
fast these days,
Mm-hmm.
especially what we see in terms of resources and AI and training and all these kind of things, and the data management issues that we are facing across different industries, not just healthcare. And people are shifting towards platform mindset. So last couple of weeks, I had an issue with the banking issue because of data infrastructure, and it was really a bug
Mm-hmm.
in their system. So this is banking, like this is like everyday data transaction, let
Mm-hmm.
alone in healthcare domain, where the transition towards a platform mindset is slower than other industry. So
Yep.
there's a lot
Mhm.
of work on the side that needs to be done from that perspective.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
also when I think about it, Brad, especially for us scientists, we have to beat the
Mm.
system. We
Mhm.
have to beat and think more creatively.
Yeah,
We should be the one leading where AI can go rather than us
Mhm.
being led by AI, right?
true.
Because
User.
there are,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
Mhm.
so we have to be creative that way.
I agree.
Yes, yeah, I think that now the sky's the limit with all the technologies and what is enabling us. And this is exactly the point of this podcast: is empowering scientists through the use of data. And data will let us get more insight, but at the same time, technology is very fast, so it's going at the very fast pace. So we should not be consumer, but we should be the one leading as researchers the way to use these technologies and these tools to make our research better. But I want to go back to the fact that you talked about the data platform and the adaptability, right? And the privacy that you talked about also, Joanne, about the regulations and the ethics that are underneath that. So I think that the choice of the data platform and that not be only functional, data friendly, user friendly, sorry, and also allowing you to capture everything in real time, but also it has to be compliant with data
Right.
privacy regulation. For if we talk about now like a worldwide spread of the worldwide access of the data from different sources throughout different continents that have different regulations and different ethics board, different it has to be compliant to different systems. So how do you think about how are the best practices to safeguard the data that are coming from participants? Most of the time we are talking about clinical research across multi-site, and how do you make sure that the data platform that you are implementing is compliant across the
Mhm.
different regulation bodies?
So yeah, and that's a good question, especially we're in healthcare, right? We have to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that it's HIPAA compliant, that we are not sharing any identifiable information, PHIs. Those are something that our data manager, or even any one of us in the data management analysis core, need to already know offhand that if there's a date on it, that might be HIPAA
Mm.
regulated. We
Yes,
need to make sure that we have
exactly.
to hide it somehow, or perhaps do
Mm-hmm.
some adjustment to the data set even before sharing it with analysts. Um,
Mm.
in some of our studies, Rim, especially the data collected is also the birth date. And that's
Mm.
important,
Yes,
right? You have
yes,
to
yes.
not share those data because it's
Identifiable.
identifiable, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
identifiable information. If there's twin
Yes.
in that set, you already know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also
Yes.
the mothers
Mm-hmm.
in that particular study,
Mm-hmm.
being able to get, but you have to be sensitive to those information as well. And
Yeah.
another thing that I've learned, especially from the past few years, is to only provide minimal information as possible.
Mm.
Those minimal information and not give everything.
Mhm.
It can
To
go
the
in
analyst, you mean?
tiers, like for example,
Yeah.
to the analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Tiers depending on their research question. For example, if they
Mm-hmm.
want to learn more and just with the treatment groups, why are you going to give symptom data if they're not asking about it, right? There
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
that agreement, or perhaps a more of like an understanding between analysts, like, okay, it depends on the data set that you're getting. um, it depends on the research question that you're getting. We're
Yes.
going to provide you this minimal information. If you need more, then we can request from us,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can make
Mm-hmm.
it available. But at least there is that pause in the
Mm.
middle
Mm-hmm.
so that we can think
Yeah.
more whether that's useful or not.
Yeah. I see pros and cons to this. I would just get back to this tiered information release. There are the pros, I think, is that you have time also to make sure that all the data are cleaned well. And when you give tiers, it's not like you give all the bulk at one point and then you don't have time really to make sure that everything like it went through the quality assurance and quality control. Of course it will go through it like like throughout the study, but I think that it's important to have a clean data given in tiers. The the cons to this tiered, I think, approach is the fact that sometimes, like now with data integration and the questioning the data in different way, you have to have different sources. So, and if
Correct.
you limit your question, we are not now into hypothesis based, like we are in discovery. So when you are in
Yes.
discovery mode in your research, you have to have data that you don't think that are important, but when you put all that together, this is when the knowledge is extracted in a better way, especially with the tools that we have now. So I think that even some data that you think that are not important at the time of your analysis, they will bring you another information that you didn't know before that is important. So this is the power of data integration when it comes to extracting insights like away from your hypothesis based and all the primary questions of your study. So I think in this modern way of doing research, and the question should not be like really known from the beginning. Sometimes some questions come up with the amount of data that you are
During
putting together. So I understand your tiered approach
which
that can have a lot of pros, but we are maybe missing opportunities very early on, and it can be delayed when all the tiers are released. So they are both like very important. I think a structured way that you say like what do you need, and we don't need to give everything because we can give more than what we need and the data are not ready to be analyzed yet.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there are opportunities that can be missed, like just in terms of time. They will be reached at the end, but I think it's two approaches.
So that's a good point, Rim. In terms of that, maybe there should be an understanding within your team that some of those
Hmm.
research questions would be included in those early tiers already. For
Yes.
example, if you are working on, some of our database or clinical variables
Hmm.
have about 300 variables.
Hmm.
It's nearly impossible for us to do a lot of the cleaning with 300 variables. However, this is
Yeah,
where the
I
communication with
understand.
the team members can say which one among this, and that is not for a data management team to
Mm,
decide. It's a
Yes.
decision that has to be made by the clinicians, by
Hmm.
the data analysts, by us. We
Yes.
implement
Yes.
it, but pretty much like,
Yes.
what do you think will be the
Hmm.
questions among all these variables? And that's
Yes.
probably what we can prioritize
Yeah,
as we go
I
along.
agree with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, Joanne. And I mean, theoretically, what I'm saying is like what I'm saying is more theory, maybe, but practically, we are constrained to some of the these challenges that we face when we have a large amount of data. So, right, sorry, you were saying something about this
on top of this, because we started from um, data
from data
privacy.
privacy and governance to
Yes.
But
this, but I wanted just to
it's very
because it
linked.
was an important topic. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's very linked. So the way usually within organization where we
Hmm.
bring these two together is through a unified data governance framework. So
Yes.
regardless of the platform that you have and regardless of the business domain that you have, which is the clinical
Hmm.
study in this discussion, uh, as an organization, what's your data governance framework? So who owns the
Yeah.
data? What kind of policies do you have?
Correct.
Who
Hmm.
can get to the data? So once you define all these rules of playing with the data as product, so now we are thinking about the data as product, then you can have disparate separate systems, and then you can have um, uh, 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 data cataloging in place so that we know who owns the data and
Correct.
what.
Hmm.
So when you want to solve the problem of partial data or the totality of the data, and you have an access to the repository of data that you have within an organization, and you know who owns the data, then you can go and request it and add it to the amount of data that you have and start building that sort of puzzle piece that is missing. So
Hmm.
having the data governance in layer and the data platform in a separate layer, but they talk to each other, is extremely
Hmm.
important. And having a data platform where the governance is embedded within, it's also very important to allow that sort of discussion to happen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the data governance has to be embedded into your data platform, but
Oh, yeah.
in a separate layer. But at the same time, when you talk about consortium and like multi-site, let's say, worldwide spread sites, I think that do you need really a data governance team for the initiative as a whole, or you will have separate data governance team who are spread across the different sites? What do you think, right?
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, data
Or Joanne,
governance.
yeah, please.
Yeah, data governance. There are many models for data governance, right? So
Hmm.
there's distributed data governance. There's unified data governance. And that depends on, at the end of the day, it depends on the organization and depends on the setting where we
Mm.
are. But usually there is a minimal set of governance that needs to be done on a smaller scale within research teams, and then there's
Okay.
a larger governance that needs to happen at the organization level. um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so this is really depending on the setting where we
On
are.
the setup. Yeah.
Mm.
What about, what do you think, Joanne? I think that you lead the
So
data governance team as well, right?
yeah, well, the thing is, when I lead the data management or analysis core, there are still other branches of the governance that
Hmm.
is not
Hmm.
including me. So I usually
Okay.
raise this concern to a steering committee, and I tell
Okay.
them, oh, for this particular topic, um,
Hmm.
can we have this added, or is this something that you can discuss as a steering committee, so that you're
Hmm.
actually not the one making the decision, but you're giving it to someone higher than you, or perhaps the ones
Yeah.
that are the PI of the study, because you
Hmm.
see that this is a very important discussion that is beyond your control or beyond your responsibility. It might be good for them to
Yeah.
decide.
Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, again, communication and making sure that everyone is aware of what type of data are released and they are
Mm.
compliant also to the regulation and standard is is very important. So one, so now I think I will that will really take me to another important topic that I think both of you are the expert in it from your sides from two different approaches. Here we are talking about the use of extensive data collection and capture, and then we want to get insight out of this data. So I think that when I talk about data, how this data will be used together is more data integration that we are now talking about from different lenses. I think from you, Joanne, is more data integration from data omics, for example, analysis where you have data assays coming from proteomics, metabolomics, RNA-seq, and all that. You integrate all the data together, but you also have data that are coming from management, data that are coming from inventory, data coming from like clinical side. So that will bring me to I think the definition of data integration for RAD, which is more like away from biology, but more technical, where you have to integrate data together. But it's the same. It's just different concepts, and the way that we use it is different. The researchers and data experts. So I think here my question for both of you from your own lenses, given us a glimpse on how the best approach for data integration, what do we take into consideration before even proceeding or thinking to integrate data together, and are there any tools now or standardized methods that allow us to do this data integration very properly and get insight out of your data? So you start, Joanne, if you want, or Red. So let's start with you, Joanne, from your
Uh-huh.
perspective.
Are there, if the question is there like a standardized format of doing data integration? I think this is where the bioinformatics community will be,
Okay.
we have different answers. I remember
Yes.
sort of like a quotation, or saying, if you give one data set to three bioinformaticians, you're probably going to get
Yes.
7 results, right?
Yes.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Depends
this
on
is
how
pretty
they do
much
the analysis, right? Mm.
correct. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
different threshold, different
Mm-hmm.
algorithms. This is
Yes.
where you can see a lot of papers being still improved as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
are how many integration sources, different databases that we use.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's really a standard. However, there are acceptable, right? Acceptable
Mm-hmm.
measurements, and this is where how we can actually learn more based on literature and based on studies that people have performed. They were able to
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
look, for example, and again, Rad, this is more of biological for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
they were able to figure out a pathway, for example, or signatures based on their data integration. And how we
Mm-hmm.
were able to learn that this is pretty much correct, there are validation techniques,
Mhm.
different
Yeah.
metrics that we set as a community to make sure that this is what I say acceptable, right?
Acceptable.
There
Yeah.
might be, right, there are
Mm-hmm.
ways that we can do it in our team in the precision vaccines program. We do some in vitro modeling. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
also we do from mice models. Whether we see the
Yeah.
same system knock out the gene,
Mhm.
pretty
Mm-hmm.
much on how we do it in some of the omics, see if they're the same.
Validation of the
Those
finding
are
through the
validation. Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
validation.
exactly.
We do it with model organism. We have seen it in my. We can do whatever with, and with at some capacity in animal
Mm-hmm.
models that might not be
Mm-hmm.
amenable for human, but when we see it in human in a particular disease or outcome, and we see it in the
Yeah.
same thing with animal models and outcome, that is probably
Mm-hmm.
our way of validation. So the standard way,
Yeah.
Rim, it's really like an ongoing process for us as scientists and also as a community.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, definitely. And I think that this is where the validation is important. We can extract the data different way. We can analyze the data different ways, but there are also acceptable, as you said, measures and standards or pipelines that are being used to get your insight out of the data. But Red, I think that I would like to touch base with you about the data integration from the fact that we are integrating data from different sources, different formats. Is there a way to prepare the data for this data integration to get insight out of your all the data that you collect throughout the whole study, not only biological, but there are so many other aspects, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I usually tend to say that everything that we do in life in general is a graph. Like you have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
nodes talking to each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And similar thing happening here where we collect data from different sources. But then these data sets we create concepts out of these database. So if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it from graph perspective, you have the knowledge graph happening behind the scene. As you keep collecting data in different systems, you integrate them, but then you extract the information. If you extract the information from semantic layer as a graph,
Mm-hmm.
you see better how these data interact to each other. So
Yeah.
we've done a lot of discussion in the past around getting data from different sources, integrating them, creating that semantic layer, and then
Mm-hmm.
plug some advanced application, especially now with the large language model that are happening
Mm-hmm.
around the corner. So we can plug the large language model on a graph and extract
Mm-hmm.
things that we even cannot see in stored in databases, but we see the relationship between the data sets, and that's why
Yes.
integrating data from a technology perspective is very important. But also what Joanne said from metrics to compare tools and things like that. We've done that in the past. We're still doing this when we have some diagnostic based on next generation sequencing, and then you make the
Mm-hmm.
choice to
The
use
thresholds.
tool X or
Thresholds.
Z with the threshold X and
Mm-hmm.
Z, and then you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself benchmarking based on the data set that you have. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, there's a reality on the ground. If you have a patient with a specific mutation that you know that that patient has, and you don't find it
Mm-hmm.
with X, and you have to go back and review your the way you analyze the data, and then you can have a different version of the pipeline that
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
reflects more the reality on the ground. So there's always that sort of there's nothing fixed. There's always that
Nothing
sort of
fixed.
calibration that's happening all the time.
Yeah. So do you think here, right, that data integration has to happen while the study is ongoing and have some visualization or trends that can emerge that we can lead us maybe to change the way that the data are being collected? So now, because you mentioned it, the use, sorry, of the AI and language model that can really improve or change maybe the way that we are managing the data and how we are collecting it even, like, do you think that this has to be implemented and visualized by the data team or everyone while the study
Mhm.
is ongoing in the future? This is how you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So the most important thing is to learn from what we're doing today, so that we can
Mm-hmm.
optimize in the future. So I've seen a lot of studies where um, the we sit early on and we design a database, and then brainstorming with the PIs, and we imagine a huge number of variables, and we create huge number of fields and databases and tables and fields and things like that. But then at the end of the day, nobody touches these variables, right? So we don't use them at all. And this is where my answer to this question is, it depends on who's going to consume the data. So the
Yeah.
consumers of the data at the end of the spectrum, they are different. You have data
Mhm.
scientists, you have data engineers, you have PIs. They have different perspective on the data, so they want to see different things. So what we do usually is, like, Steve Jobs used to say that before, is start with the end in mind and then go back and design the
Hmm.
system. So what do you
Mm.
Yeah.
want to see? What's your ideal vision of uh, a dashboard that's going to reflect your study in real time? What do you want to see on a daily basis? What do you want to have?
Hmm.
What kind of topics that you're going to have when you have meetings with your team? And so all these kind of things, we design them first, and then
Hmm.
retrospectively we go back and say, okay, that's what we should do in early on in the design. That's the number of fields that we need to capture, and then that's going to affect the way you're going to integrate the data. That's going to affect the ontology that you're going to have within your knowledge graph, as I mentioned before. And this is all a back and forth exercise again. So there's nothing like a sort of a vision that is going to be set up in the beginning and carried on along the study. It's a back
Hmm.
and forth exercise, and this is where, again, communication within the team is extremely important for all the stakeholders to have a say on this.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that, as you said, like communication is important, but also having the different users of your data, consumers of your data, I would say, they have different backgrounds, different perspective on what to use and what they want to see in the data to make informative decision throughout the entire life cycle of the study. And I think the dream, from my perspective, is to have, of course, different, let's say, like the same platform used for by everyone, but different visuals or different dashboards for every different consumer, whether it's a clinician, is a study PI, it's a data analyst, and so on. And they can interrogate the data as data are consumed. So this is where I see the future, where I want to know now, like, what should I change in my protocol, for example, to make this thing better, because I see that this is dropping over time. So like in terms of like data quality as well, and so on. So I think this is where we can use these new technologies, and this is why I mentioned integration of the data as we go and not at the very end. So the different consumers of the data can have an informative decision on how the trial is going, what can I change, what can I tweak to make it better before learning lessons for the next one. So this is where I see the future. So Joanne, any last thought? Thank you very much for all this information that you provided and the time to join us
Yeah.
for this session. I love it, and I enjoy every time that I talk to you about what you do and the future of clinical research. When I talk to you, I see that there is hope, that people will work really worldwide together and making it accessible and easy, and so a nice experience as well, because at the personal level you have to put people together that don't know each other. When we started to work together, I think after like maybe several months or a year, we had the chance to meet, but we were working together remote with people also overseas. So it's really important to build that connection and human, I think. Relations are the base, still, like we can use the most most fancy technology or anything, but it will not make this happen if people are not really bound together and work together as a team.
Yeah.
So any last thoughts, if you would like to share with us your upcoming exciting projects in the field, or anything that
Yeah.
you would like to
Would
share
love
with
to
our
share about it.
community? Yeah.
Would love to share it. As you know, we're still trying to finish some of our COVID projects. We're also working with COVID vaccines. One thing that I'm really excited about is actually a consortium that we're also co-leading at the moment, still doing a lot of data management and analysis. And this is with vaccine safety. As you know, we're
Nice.
part of the Precision Vaccines Program. We are working with collaborators across the entire globe about
Mm-hmm.
vaccine safety. It actually is spearheaded as a part of the Coalition of Emergency Preparedness Initiative, or CEPI, where
Happy.
there
Yeah.
are some questions about
Mhm.
if the vaccine even safe, right? Everyone, or probably,
Yes.
the majority of the world got the COVID vaccine.
Mhm.
And a lot of still has apprehensions after that because of adverse events of vaccines. For example, there are some of those that might be related to a specific type of vaccine. They probably heard from the news about myocarditis or pericarditis based on the mRNA vaccine, or with the thrombosis with the adenovirus vaccine. And again, this is really like an initiative that we are currently doing at the moment, that we need as researchers or as investigators or vaccine immunologists to address the concern of the individuals and the public. And but for us to not, you know, we should not dismiss any of these adverse events happening, because based on what we've seen as data, it might happen, although at a very small amount, like it might be at one up to 1 million
Mhm.
incidents. But we should continue learning more about it, and this is where our study is actually happening. Is now we're going to perform omic type techniques to vaccine safety from COVID-19 vaccine. Um, yeah, this is really interesting because a lot of our viewers, or we should know more about the
Yes.
COVID vaccine.
Yes.
But again, not dismiss any of that, but really address the
Mhm.
core. Because the more that
Yeah.
we became transparent to this,
Mhm.
the more that we can hear the concerns of people and understand how it is. Are there some precision vaccination that we can apply for this particular
Yes.
patient? For example, if they have a predisposition to any type of this adverse event, maybe they shouldn't get this type of vaccine. Maybe they should get the other one. Is there
Mhm.
like a age specific question that we can answer? Is it more on the gender or sex related
Mhm.
issues or differences? So yeah, that's one of the projects that I'm really excited about. Still data, a lot of data, doing a lot of omics. Um, and we're also looking for collaborators. So I think this might be a good platform.
Mm.
If there's any of the collaborators, we're working with government in different countries. We're also working with industries. If any of our collaborators would like to work with us, let us know. We would be happy to share our study, and we're still looking for other places that they can actually contribute some of this collected data, so that we can learn more about vaccine safety. And also, there's also a caveat to that, in which one of the
Mhm.
study, as a part of it, is a preparation for a ACSIX, or a potential. We're
A
not we're
pandemic.
not saying that
Infectious.
there's going to be a pandemic, but
Mhm.
just a preparation, and pretty much
Yes.
like how can we standardize protocol for
Mhm.
this type of thing.
Mhm.
And that's probably something based on experience that we should probably talk about sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing your future of the initiatives that you are part of now, and also opening the door for collaboration as well. That's very important. I think this is our nature as researchers. We don't really work on a confined, like contained, like bubble, but we have to collaborate and open doors for more expertise to bring their insights, and things can go faster as well. You I think the point that you said, like about giving understanding how vaccines work and giving it to people, that's great, but you need to make sure that safety is there. But people, this is the must worry of the general public, whether it's safe or not.
Exactly.
This is the first question. And I understand in COVID we could not really look at safety before. We know that mRNA vaccines were used before, but the safety, I think that the safety projects that you are doing now for vaccines is very important for the public to know about it as soon as the data are released, because this is one of the major concerns that everyone has when they give vaccine to their baby when he's born, or in case of pandemic. And being prepared, that's the second axis of your future project, that you need to be prepared to implement what you have learned, as we discussed throughout all this session, to be able to implement it swiftly, but implement it well in a way that it takes less time. Of course, regulation and all the ethics and all that will still take the same time, or maybe like we know that people have done it in a in a record time in COVID. But being ready as a researcher and as a data manager and data analyst and clinician for anything that can be happening in the future, or even like having the same pace without any pandemic, like having the
Yeah.
same pace in research. Why do we make it
Yeah.
slow when it can be faster? We know that we can do it
Right.
faster. So thanks for
Yes.
sharing that, and looking forward to continue also working with you another day if that's
Yes.
possible. So Rad, for you, any updates, initiative that you are involved in, any new courses that you are releasing soon for our Inscripted followers, and
Yeah.
anything that can interest the audience that you can share with us?
Yeah, we always continuously write about all these topics and more on Unscripted. So I invite everyone to take a look at Unscripted, runbylinks.com. So there's a lot of content material that we put on a weekly basis. And also we released our bold framework, which is
Mm-hmm.
a framework that covers a lot of what we said today. And there's a lot of recommendation on how to do things the right way from a design perspective, from data management perspective, stakeholders engagement. There's a lot that is being covered in this framework. So people can see that on our website. I think I'm just going to put it right here,
Yeah.
runbyx.com/bold. So people
Mm-hmm.
can go there. It's free. It's an hour long discussion when we cover a lot of these things that we discussed together today.
Great. And any new initiative or any partnership that Run by Links? I know that you are the the CEO of Run by Links. So, what are new projects or partnership or collaboration that you are up to these days?
Yeah, we are partnering with a lot of data players in the field. So we have a very nice partnership that we're going to be announcing on Monday. So that's going to unlock
Mm-hmm.
a lot of potential in terms of data analytics, AI, and data management. So this is to be announced next week. Yeah, so a lot coming up.
That's exciting. Thank you. So we're looking forward to hearing what Aaron Billings has to release next week, and we will please keep looking at the Unscripted. It's free. It's there and available for everyone who wants to. We do like data literacy, and also we talk about anything changing. For example, like your career from scientist to entrepreneur, or like how to like quick maybe cheat sheet about data harmonization, data lineage, things that we learn from experience and not really like you cannot maybe find in books sometimes. So thank you, Joanne, for sharing the valuable
Thank you.
insights today and
Yeah,
experience
this
as
is
well.
great.
That was a very, very interesting and nice discussion that we had, the three of us. Thank you, Raj, for all the information that you have provided and your feed, like your point of view in the different points that we have discussed today. So to recap, we have discussed the importance of data in clinical research, the best practices that we heard from Joanne and Red today about data management, data handling, privacy, regulations, the significance of choosing the right data platform. It's not a tool, it's a platform that will cover the end-to-end and allow researchers to get insight out of their data faster and nicer, and also being able to evolve at the same pace as technology is changing nowadays. So thank you very much, and looking forward to having you again in another topic.
Yeah.
Whenever you want, you are welcome to our channel, Joanne. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you so much.
To everyone.
Thank
Thanks, John.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.